Dear colleagues and friends, welcome to this session of the ELSI Dialogues webinar. My name is Melanie Goesov. I'm a senior scientist in the BBMRI ERIC ELSI team, and I will be moderating this ELSI dialogue together with Zisis Koslakidis. And I also want to mention this webinar was organized by our colleague Ilaria Colusi. And today we are going to be exploring the role of cancer survivorship in research and especially in the area of the European Mission Cancer. But before we begin with the topic, briefly some background about BBMRI ERIC. So BBMRI ERIC stands for Biobanking and Biomolecular Resources Research Infrastructure, European Research Infrastructure Consortium, and it has the scope to facilitate access to sample and data collections across Europe to advance biomedical research for the benefit of European citizens. And to reach this goal, BBMRI ERIC relies on a network of national nodes in the member countries, as well as the team of interdisciplinary experts from medicine, social science, ethics, law, IT, quality management, patient communities, and industry partners with shared values of facilitated access to progress in healthcare and disease prevention. And in 2013, BBMRI ERIC was set up as a distributed research infrastructure, and it is one of the largest research infrastructures for health research in Europe. About the ELSI team, or ELSI Services and Research, we provide support on ethical, legal, and societal issues. We operate on the basis of a federated model in partnership with a network of experts from academia and practice from across both our national nodes and project partners along three key cornerstones, which are research, service, and training. And this webinar is supported by two EU projects in which BBMRI ERIC acts as coordinator. First, CANSERV, and CANSERV focuses on providing cutting-edge cancer research services across Europe. It aims to offer a comprehensive portfolio of oncology-related research services available to all scientists in EU member countries, associated countries, and beyond. And for more information, please visit www.canserv.eu. And the other project is Performance, which stands for Public Engagement in Research Infrastructures for Mission Cancer, Managing Complexity of Emerging Technologies. And in this project, we aim to strengthen stakeholder engagement in cancer research by addressing ethical, legal, and societal implications linked to emerging technologies, artificial intelligence, biobanking, and the European Health Data Space. And if you want to learn more about this project, please visit www.performance.eu. As mentioned, this dialogue is also connected to the EU Mission Cancer, which goal is to improve the lives of more than 3 million people by 2030 through prevention, cure, and for those affected by cancer, including their families, to live longer and better. And it follows three key objectives, which are understanding cancer, prevention and early detection, diagnosis and treatment, and improving quality of life. And without further delay, I want to welcome our today's experts. We have 4 experts today, and I'm happy to briefly introduce all of them. So first, Virginia Sancini is an assistant professor of bioethics and clinical ethics in the Department of Oncology and Hemato-Oncology at the University of Milan, where she leads the clinical bioethics unit. And she got a PhD scholarship at the European School of Molecular Medicine, European Institute of Oncology, and University of Milan in foundations of the life sciences and their ethical consequences. She has extensive experience as a researcher and ethics consultant in the topics of vulnerability, oncology, ethical implications of new technologies, especially in healthcare settings. And her last publication from 2025 is a book on clinical ethics in oncology. Maria Theodoridou is a secretary of the board of directors of ELOC and president of the Cancer Support Association Living Well with Cancer in Heraklion in Crete. Maria is since 1986, has been working at the development and as research and development engineer at the Institute of Computer Science of the Foundation of Research and Technology, HELLAS. Maria was diagnosed with, after acting also as a caregiver for her parents and her partner, who all affected by cancer. And she was herself diagnosed with cancer. And this experience strengthened her determination to fight with all her strength for every patient's right to comprehensive and equitable healthcare. Merel Henning was diagnosed with stage 4 NSCLC in November 2014. In early 2015, she became active in the patient advisory board of Lung Cancer Netherlands. She became board member of Lung Cancer Europe in April 2025. She's part of the steering committee of the Lung Policy Network since 2024 and chairs the Patient Advocates Committee at the ISLC. In Cancer Patients Europe, she represents LUCE in the board as secretary, and in the Netherlands, she started the foundation Stichting Merel Wereld to raise European awareness and to get research done. As a result, the Hayes University of Applied Sciences started a research course, Merel's Wereld, in 2017. And the Stichting, the Hayes, and the MCG initiated, created, funded, and implemented an ongoing research program. Apologies for my non-existing Dutch language skills. And finally, Richard Stevens. He has been a patient advocate for 30 years and has so far survived 2 cancers and a heart emergency, plus several comorbidities and late effects. And as a patient, he has participated in 4 interventional studies and 15 others. As an advocate, he has helped design over 30 more studies. Richard chairs the UK's Cancer Research Advocates Forum, is vice chair of the European Cancer Project, and has held several other leadership roles in the UK and internationally. And he works with patient groups and advocates, academics and industry, policymakers, funders, and regulators. Richard helped found the All Trials campaign and Use My Data movement, and he is the founding co-editor-in-chief of the Journal of Research Involvement and Engagement, and his professional life included successful careers in education, journalism, and local government. Welcome to this webinar, everyone, and thank you for your time and expertise on this important topic.
Thank you very much, Melanie, and welcome to all of our experts today. Looking forward to a very active discussion and a very, very informative panel. As we look into cancer survivorship, I work at the World Health Organization, so the definition that we use is quite a comprehensive one. So for us, cancer survivorship focuses on the health of the person with cancer from the time of diagnosis until the end of life. So what does this mean? It includes the physical, mental, emotional, social, and financial effects of cancer that begin at the diagnosis and continue through treatment and beyond. The survivorship experience also includes issues related to follow-up care, including regular health and wellness checkups, late effects of treatment, cancer recurrence, second cancers, and quality of life. Family members, friends, and caregivers are also considered part of the survivorship experience. Yet, when we talk about cancer survivorship, we tend to simplify things. We present cancer survivorship, often presented as a success story. And then the question to our panelists is, when we present it as a simple success story from an ethical perspective and also from a practical perspective, what are we missing? What do we lose or overlook when we frame it mainly in these simplified terms? And I would like for this first panel to have the panelists speak in the order they were presented, just simply so that we can follow easier. but for the next panels, of course, we'll mix it up. So Virginia, it's over to you.
So thank you very much. First of all, can you hear me? Yes, okay. So first of all, thank you very much for this very nice opportunity. I'm glad to be here. And thanks also for this very, very important question. So I would like to start with a premise because I think that the first thing to say is that the survivorship narrative has been extremely important and in many ways very positive. Because historically, if we just go back to the history of this notion, moving from the idea of the cancer victim to that of the cancer survivor helped give visibility, agency, but also collective voice to people affected by cancer. So in many ways, it contributed to advocacy, research, and greater public awareness. So I would not want to dismiss this contribution. But at the same time, from an ethical perspective, we should remember that the words that we use do not simply describe reality. They obviously shape how we understand it. And as some scholars have pointed out, labels such as survivors are never entirely neutral because they carry cultural meanings, but above all, implicit expectations. And I see two main risks, if I may. The first one is that when survivorship is framed mainly as a success story, we may begin to imagine a single but also relatively uniform experience. But there is no single survivorship experience. People live with and beyond cancer in many different ways, depending on the diagnosis, treatment trajectory, social circumstances, age, family situations, and also many other factors. A second risk, which I think is very important, is that the language of survivorship can sometimes become associated with ideals of resilience, strength, but also personal triumph. And for many people, this can be empowering, but for many others, it may feel restrictive. Not everyone experiences cancer as a story of growth, of transformation, or victory. Some people continue to live with uncertainty, fear of recurrence, long-term sequelae of treatment, or ongoing disease. So from an ethical standpoint, we should be careful not to turn one possible experience into a normative expectation. So in that sense, in my view, survivorship should not be understood as a single story of success, but as a plurality of experiences that somehow deserve to be recognized on their own terms.
Thank you very much. And Maria, we're coming to you because you've experienced several of these life trajectories in your immediate family. So what are your thoughts?
Yes, indeed. I think it's problematic when we stay on the success stories of survivorship because it's not a matter of just numbers of who had a good outcome and who not. And especially in Greece, where I come from, it was quite common, at least some years ago, to regard, somebody as survivor if he had been, longer than 5 years or something, which it's not true. I totally agree with your definition of not your definition, the World Health Organization definition, that survivorship starts from the moment of the diagnosis. And it's a long pathway that we have to consider all aspects of this trip, I would call it, and affects also not only the patient himself, herself, but also the family members, the caregivers, all the community around this person. And so for me, the question is not to just look at the medical outcome, but also the social and ethical issues around it. So the basic question is not how long does a person live, but how well does this person live after cancer, during cancer, and under what conditions. So the quality of life has to come into the scene, and measure this quality of life instead of measuring only the number of years. So we have to be very careful about what we look at. Up to now, I think the medical community would count number of years, and that was the success thing. But this is misleading. That's my fear. We have to look at the whole scene and what is this, to measure the quality, how well somebody lives, even if it's one day of life.
Thank you very much. Meryl, does this reflect your experiences?
Yes, well, in the lung cancer field, there are, when we talk about survivors, we normally talk about patients who had a treatment with a curative intent. There's a lot of discussion within our community about what we call ourselves. Some are saying living with lung cancer, some are saying thriving with. Normally, I mention myself a long-term responder, because we don't want to be just a cancer patient who has survived, but we also don't want to be a survivor, because then you are kind of separated from the cancer, and it is part of ourselves. Even if we had a curative intended treatment, it is part of our identity, because and it changed so much. So I totally agree with the World Health Organization's definition. It starts with the beginning. It starts at diagnosis and it ends when you die, because it's the same as having children. you always stay a mother, even if they are having children themselves. So for me, it's very important that we are using the terms that we feel comfortable with, and that we are also being treated as human beings, but not getting rid of the new identity that we get with the cancer diagnosis.
Thank you very much. Richard, we're coming to you. Of course, it was ladies first in this round. What is your view on terms of the identities and the language that we use?
Well, first of all, can I just say this is the most interesting cancer patient clinic I've ever sat in. It's wonderful. These conversations are brilliant because I completely agree with everyone. The words are really important, but you don't know what the words mean to me unless you try them out on me and you ask me. Certainly, I'm one of those patients and I say patient, not survivor, by the way. But I don't like this idea that cancer and treatment is a battle and it's a struggle, especially not when the end eventually does come. I really do not want anyone to write an obituary that says he lost his fight. Yeah, I look at it as I've had 20 plus extra years so far and I'm still counting. So I do think the language is really important, but sometimes it does energize people to know that they're in a struggle. And if that's their way of coping, then good luck to them. Whatever works for you, and you carry on doing it and make sure your doctors and your nurses understand that. So I'm really interested in this idea that it's about quality, not simply the number of years. But one of the concerns I have then is to wind back to something Virginia said about that ethics of it all, which is if we do lots and lots, we believe in evidence-based medicine. We're continuing to do lots and lots of clinical trials in cancer for all sorts of new treatments or new pathways, whatever it might be. But so many studies now are about progression-free survival. In other words, they're looking at what happens to the cells and molecules. And although quality of life is often put in there, it's a secondary outcome. And actually, no, To patients, no, it's not. Our experience is what matters to us, the way we live, or indeed the way we die. That is what matters to us and to our families. And I really do wish researchers would understand it, and I would make a plea for ethics committees to actually look at the endpoints of the studies and start querying those a heck of a lot more than they're doing. Grr.
Thank you. That was very well noted. But also, coming back to you, when we talk about, we use the terms and the identity and the language, does it change across the lived experience? So, do you think of these terms differently now as to 5 years ago, as to 10 years ago?
I think it does change across the lived experience, and I think the lived experience, it is really difficult to divorce the lived experience from your diagnosis, your stage, your treatments, and of course your prognosis. Life is different from someone who is diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma to someone who's been told they've got pancreatic cancer. You know, your mindset is pretty different from the word go.
Indeed. Meryl, what are your experience in terms of the lived experience and the terms that we use throughout that?
Well, I agree with Richard. Can you repeat the question? This is my side effect.
Of
Sorry.
course. Don't worry. It's just that we use terms to describe survivorship and the identity that we have, but these terms or definitions can change according to the lived experience. So you mentioned that you have these discussions in the Netherlands, and how do these definitions change over time?
Well, first, when you are being diagnosed, you're surviving because you go from scan to scan, and after a while, when everything is fine and the scans are fine, there's still a lot of fear of progression of disease, but you get a little bit more confidence in your body. So we get from surviving to living with. And now I call myself a long-term responder because the pills are, well, after 11 years are still working very well. So it's the mindset that you have, because if I see people and I've been there for a weekend and we say goodbye, they say, well, you have strength or something. So they see me still as a cancer patient, even when you are doing everything that they. So it's also the mindset they have, but it doesn't matter. What matters is how I feel and how I live with my disease.
Thank you. Maria, is that the same in Greece?
I think it's the language that we use is very, very important. And for me, the problem starts not from us, the patients or the medical community, but from the media. They use the wrong expression. So I totally agree with Richard, this fighting terminology and the loss of a battle. I mean, these are expressions that shouldn't be used, and they create a strange feeling to all of us that we live with the disease right now. And we started recently in Greece a project with ALOC, the federation, the Cancer Patient Federation, and the government to change the language that is being used publicly by the journalists, the media, and everything. And we believe that this might bring a better situation in how we all perceive survivorship and living with cancer.
Can I add something still?
Of course, yes.
Because it's also the same with palliative care. If you mentioned palliative care, just to and that people are thinking that it is kind of end of life care. So there's a lot of confusion about the wording that we use. So now we're using the word more comprehensive care of something. And it's the same that people are saying, well, you are terminally sick. And I said, no, no. Well, I have a terminal disease, but I'm not terminal yet. So people don't understand, I think, and they don't hurt me, but I know that they hurt a lot of people who feel ashamed that they got cancer because they didn't fight enough or something that they think they need to do. So yeah, I think we need to get rid of all the language about warriors and fighting and battlefields, etc. It's no use.
Thank you. Virginia, you did a lot of work on the language and the ethics. So what would be your take on the lived experience and how our definitions change, or the use of our definitions changes over time?
This is another very important question, and I really would like to also thank all the other speakers because they enriched a lot, you know, the social science or the ethical debates. I basically broadly agree on what has been said so far. What I find actually interesting is that the concept of survivorship has really evolved over time, and this is very important. I would say that historically it emerged to basically the notion of cancer survivor as a lot of threats, but it emerged to challenge older views which focused exclusively on cure or death, and to draw attention on the ongoing experiences of people affected by cancer. So while I think that there are some shortcomings, some challenges in using this expression, and I completely, you know, follow Maria's conversation about the impact that media had on the overall discussion about cancer survivorship, I think that somehow it may remind us that survivorship is not just a medical category, as it has been pointed out. It's also a social and ethical one. Because of that, it really invites us to look beyond the disease itself and to consider how cancer affects people's lives, which I think it's the most important point.
Thank you. Richard, did you have something to add so that you unmute?
Not at the moment. I'm busy scribbling all sorts of notes for a big finish later on.
Thank you. So Virginia, let me stay with you just in terms of the social sciences. So what are the elements that we're missing? What are the gaps in our research that we still need to identify so that we move forward in the way that is more appropriate in shaping the language in a better way for use?
Okay, so I would like to start from the positive narrative, which means that I really think that it would be important also to acknowledge how much progress has been made. Because, you know, over the last 2 decades, survivorship research, psycho-oncology, but also patient-reported outcomes, quality of life research have become much more visible and influential also in this kind of literature. But as you said, at the same time, important gaps remain. And one area that to me deserves much greater attention is survivorship among the so-called AYA patients, right? So adolescents and young adults. And in this population, cancer often occurs as a stage of life where identity, sexuality, autonomy, relationships, and future plans are still being shaped. And what sometimes is missing from research is a deeper understanding of how treatment-related consequences can permanently affect these life trajectories. I'll just make an example from my own experience as clinical ethicist. Think about a young patient undergoing highly invasive surgery. And this patient may face long-term consequences in terms of sexual function, continence, fertility, body image, or intimate relationships. So in these cases, survivorship is not simply about adapting to the consequences of a disease. It's about understanding how cancer and its treatment reshape a person's responsibilities for the future. So I believe that we still need much more interdisciplinary research on these long-term existential dimensions of survivorship. And another point, which I think is very important, a second gap to me concerns our ability to understand survivorship as an interconnected experience. We often study symptoms, psychological well-being, health behaviors, social factors, but as separate entities. Yet patients experience them together, as you know, people have rightly pointed out. Think about head and neck cancer survivors, and another, example taken from my own experience. They basically experience long-term functional consequences which may affect social relationships, but also behaviors such as smoking or alcohol consumption. Or also think about HPV-related cancers, which raise questions that are simultaneously clinical, but also psychological, social, educational. So issues such as sexuality, stigma, communication, but also health literacy cannot be understood in isolation. So while survivorship research has grown enormously in my own understanding, I believe that one of the next challenges is really to move beyond isolated outcomes and develop a richer understanding of these combined factors.
Thank you. Indeed, yes, it has to be interdisciplinary. Otherwise, we're going to move into these silos and become obstacles to having impactful research. Maria, I am aware that the ELOC is very active in terms of the research, but perhaps you would like to expand a little bit on the research that is taking place in Greece at the moment, and also how do you see the gaps that still need to be addressed?
If I may add to what Virginia
Of
mentioned,
course.
there are also the social dimension. For example, what about the right to be forgotten for the young patients that they are cured, let's say, from the cancer, but then they have to live the rest of their lives with a lot of social problems, like, getting a loan from the bank because their medical record is, red because of the cancer. And even if they are cancer free, they still cannot go on with a normal life. It's not only the problems that we get regarding our body, if we have side effects from the treatments or other kind of problems. There are also a lot of social issues that we have to look into. And also the differences in access to different services, depending on where you live or what. Muriel earlier mentioned that she has access to a very special center, a very good one. Now, I live in an island in the south of Greece where the villages in the mountains, they have access to nothing. So there are a lot of different situations that somehow, I don't know how research can look into all this, but certainly we have to take these dimensions into account when we think about systems and how. And of course, the opinion of the patients. They have, and it has to be. The opinion of the patients has to have a significant role and not just to be there to say, oh, okay, we ask the patients too. It needs to be a real involvement, real.
Thank you very much. Muriel, I think you've spotted a research gap many years ago. So what would be your experience from the Netherlands?
Well, in the Netherlands, I'm glad to live in the Netherlands because we are very open, the researchers, to work together with patients as real partners, and not just as a token. what we see. But if we are looking at at the gaps, it's when we are stage 4 and we have treatment for many years. And then the treatment is being approved by the EMA, and it's a grade 2 side effect, and all the clinicians say it's manageable. But it's manageable maybe for a few weeks, but we live with that side effect for years. So it's not just about the late effects, but also how can you make sure? And we always say, well, we'd rather have a grade 3 side effect just for a few weeks and then less to nothing, because no one sees what we are suffering. And if I say that my cognitive ability is getting worse, then they say, well, I'm in menopause, for me it's also worse. So it's kind of it's being downgraded. So yeah, if I look at the gaps in research, it's more to really understand what the needs are, and to first consult patients to get a real good research question. But we had also the IMPRESS study in the Netherlands where we looked at the patient as a whole, so more the holistic approach. And I think this will be more mainstream than just a one day.
And this is accepted by the cancer community. It's something that they're happy to participate.
Yes. Yes, because now we get our voice more. Research was always a little bit more clinical and more targeted to one specific group, and now finally we get a voice as long-term responders to also be part of that we're being acknowledged.
Excellent. Richard, over to you.
Yes, well, this is slightly embarrassing after what Maria said, but in the UK we are fortunate, or we have struggled a long time to get where we are. We have a whole series of national research groups into cancer research. They are academically led, but they do work with industry. We have patient representatives on all of those groups, and we have done for the past 20+ years. One of those groups is Living Well with and Beyond Cancer. We also had funding several years ago for a whole program where we actually went out to 3,000 patients and caregivers to identify 26 research priorities for living with and beyond cancer. And some are really obvious and big: coping with pain, fatigue, what's the best treatment pathway in any given cancer. So some of them now need refreshing because things have moved on, but others, do people living alone suffer greater levels of depression? And we know that 1/3 of cancer survivors, after they be given the all clear, if that's their fate, 1/3 of them report symptoms of depression within 12 months. And we know that because we are now able to look at data, and hopefully the European health data space will enable that to be done across countries, and AI will enable us to handle the massive amounts of data that we hold. But there are other things too. As we progress down the line of more and more aggressive treatments to try to cure cancer, more and more treatments zeroing on cells and biology, I do wish people would remember that I am more than my molecules. I want that on a t-shirt to show every doctor I come across. But again, this comes back to numbers. 1/3 of cancer patients in Europe are going to suffer heart problems at some point in their lives after their treatment stops, sometimes during their treatment, because of the drugs we're giving them, and because of general problems like obesity, and we haven't sorted out smoking. So there are things being piled up. I did enjoy Virginia's comment early on about young patients and what they face for the rest of their lives, but I don't consider myself a young patient now, sadly. But I was in my 30s with my first load of treatment, and my oncologist said, in 10 years' time, we're going to have to start checking you for heart problems. And it was almost 10 years to the month when I keeled over during my annual checkup for heart problems with a heart problem. Lucky I was in a hospital when it happened.
Absolutely, yes. And do you see the same improvement in the social sciences and not just the clinical side?
There is lots of improvement there, but we don't have enough social sciences and social scientists, and funders don't fund quality of life or mental health or well-being research. They are into cells and molecules.
Thank you. So in terms of let's look at the system, the healthcare system, let's say, and the research communities. So what are the ethical responsibilities that healthcare systems and research communities have towards people living with and beyond cancer throughout the survivorship experience? So we spoke about individual experiences and about the research that where the data may be missing. If we look at it from the system level, what are the ethical responsibilities? What do we need to look into?
May I start?
Of course, yes.
Okay, so just one observation, which I think it's very important. One of the last comments, the one of Richard, which I think it's very important. So just one observation, because we spoke of gaps in social science literature, but there are also gaps in research, as Meryl has rightly pointed out. And one of the observations of Richard was very important, because I think that we need longer term perspectives, and this is very important because many of the most important consequences of cancer do not emerge during treatment or immediately afterwards. He did the example of cardiac problems, but also depression and other many factors, and they may become visible years or decades later. If we want to understand survivorship, we cannot limit ourselves to short-term consequences, and this is very important. So we basically have to also to focus about trajectories, and this is one of the take-home message to close, the debate that basically we raised before. And as to your question, which I think is very important because it draws the attention to the public health level, not just to the clinical ethics, scenario. So I think that for me, the first responsibility is continuity. Continuity should not be understood simply as a long-term follow-up, as I just said, but it means also recognizing that people change over time. As Richard said, there are issues regarding to identity. Meryl also raised this point. Think about also AYA patients, but also adult cancer patients. We may, as patients, we may return to the healthcare system 10 or 20 years later. And basically, we are very different persons facing, different questions at work, relationships, sexuality, parenthood, identity. So from an ethical standpoint, survivorship challenges us to move beyond a model, I would say, focused on episodes of care towards one capable of accompanying people across different life stages. I also think that research communities also have ethical responsibilities. And to me, their role is not just to develop new therapies, but also to generate knowledge that is meaningful for interested parties. I think about, for instance, rare cancers, where access to expertise, evidence, but also specialized care often depends on strong collaborative networks and also long-term investments in research. Well, looking at Europe, I'm basically positive because I see very important initiatives. I think about Cancer Mission, the strength of rare cancer networks, and also technological innovation, as Richard has rightly pointed out. But on the other end, I think that there are some ethical lessons that we can draw from survivorship, and the most important one is that success in oncology somehow creates new responsibilities. Just to make an example, if success is measured only by survival, obviously our obligations end too early, right? But if success somehow means enabling people to live meaningful life after cancer, then research and healthcare systems must remain committed long after treatment has ended. And I think it's one of the most important take-home messages.
Thank you. Maria, what is your view and from a log for the healthcare system level in the research community?
Well, I have to admit that I felt jealous when I heard Richard speaking and describing what they have, and also Muriel. However, we have done a lot the last years, and we are improving. The whole situation is becoming much better. But I would say that what the European research has to do is to focus more on the patients and less on the disease. So the systems have to be patient-centered and not disease-centered. We don't science has succeeded a lot in knowing a lot about the biology, the nature of the disease, but now we see that there is a turn towards the person again. And this is the important thing. We have to put all the emphasis on the person-centered research and medicine.
Indeed. Meryl, are you in agreement?
Yes, totally. And for me, it's important that the role of the oncologist will change. Or at least he needs to be different in what he's asking the patient, and not just, well, the tumor is gone, or the tumor is the same, so everything is fine. And I know a lot of patients who are afraid to ask for help on different levels, for psychological help or other help, because they feel that they are a burden to the healthcare system already, because we're always talk about the expensive treatment and etc. So they think, well, I'm glad that I'm alive. So we need to have the conversation with the patient, and if the oncologist is not able to do it, then there should be a specialized nurse, and we need to, and when there is a need, we need to have the access to that treatment, psychological treatment, etc. So it's about the holistic, it's about access, and it's about the right communication skills, that we really treat the patients and not just the tumor.
Richard, what is your take on this question?
Well, again, we are luckier in the UK, but that's partly because we have been advocating very hard for 25 years more. Half the people I started with are no longer with us. But we had, in 2015, we produced a national cancer plan for England, which was the first one that ever had a patient co-author. And perhaps coincidentally, it's the first one that actually said the patient's experience is as important as clinical outcomes. We now have a new national cancer plan 10, 11 years later, which in effect says patient experience is a clinical outcome and beyond, but actually it recognizes the health service isn't going to be the only thing to deliver it. We have to look into the community, we have to look at patient support groups, much the same actually as they've been doing for stroke survivors for many years, certainly in the UK. And we have to set up a whole range of networks. Patient shall talk unto patient, survivor unto survivor. And I do think that is one way forward, as long as our health service does not abdicate its responsibilities. And the truth is, it is going to need more resourcing, but we all need to think differently. Cancer survivorship, it's millions of people already, and as we get better at treating cancer, it's going to be more and more of us. It's actually a public health issue, and I think Meryl's comment about oncologists will need to think differently. I think so will health services, so will policymakers. I go back again to what I've just said. It is a public health issue. Half of us are going to get cancer, and half of us will still be alive 10 years later.
Yes, and it really loops very nicely towards that system level view that we started with in terms of the discussion. I would like to invite any final comments, parting thoughts from all of our panelists. Virginia, maybe you can start.
Yes, so just a brief recall on what Richard has said, and because I was thinking about what does it mean to have somehow a meaningful involvement of cancer survivors, which is still on a public health level. And I was thinking about the fact that somehow meaningful involvement begins when we somehow stop thinking of cancer survivors as simply stakeholders, and we start recognizing them as, I would say, contributors to knowledge, right? So researchers, we spoke about oncologists, but researchers, generate important forms of knowledge about disease, the treatment and outcomes. But to me, survivors generate a different kind of knowledge about what it actually means to live with and beyond cancer. And these forms of knowledge are not interchangeable, but they are complementary. So for this reason, I think that from a public health level, meaningful involvement is not simply about consulting survivors. The proposal, that was shared by Richard in terms of co-authorship, it's really great, because it's not just to invite them sharing their stories, but it's about creating spaces where experiential knowledge can genuinely interact with clinical, scientific, and policy expertise. And this, I think, it's very, very important.
Thank you. Maria?
Yeah, I totally agree with what Virginia just said. It's survivorship should not be regarded a medical outcome. For me, that's the most important. It is the experience of the person going through the disease. And so all these people that have the experience, they should participate actively to define how this survivorship has to be studied, support the survivorship, and also measure everything that takes part in this journey. And they really have to be real participants, active participants. Nowadays, we are talking about these living labs, but it has to become something that will really take a good form and work as it should be. And not just, my worry is not to stay on buzzwords and nice, words, and not be an everyday practice.
Meryl, over to you.
Well, for me, it's always what Virginia was mentioning. The researchers have they understand the disease, the clinicians understand the treatment, but I understand myself, and I'm the expert of myself. So all three of us should be at the table to make sure that every part of the patient is being taken into account in the treatment options, but also in the late effects and the treating well. So it's not just living longer, but living better.
Thank you. Indeed, that is absolutely the case. Richard, thank you very much for the resources that you have provided. We have put them in the chat. Any parting thoughts from your part?
Well, two. First and foremost, I wish the UK was still part of various EU initiatives. I think that would make life better for all cancer patients and certainly cancer patient advocacy. Cancer does not recognize international boundaries, and I don't think helping cancer patients should be hampered by them either. I completely agree with what Meryl has just said. Cancer patients are the experts in their situations, and I'm really touched by what Maria has said about the situation where she lives. Inequity is by definition, it is simply unfair. And we have inequity in the UK. We have the big teaching hospitals and we have district general hospitals. And I'm afraid you don't get the same level of care and aftercare at those two different levels. So to me, inequality and inequity are things we have to look at. And you cannot get that right unless you talk to the people that you're not talking to and you're not listening to now. And that's actually where good patient advocates come in and where organizations like Cancer Patients Europe will be able to help. And more power to Maria and her work on cancer language. I love to know the results of that.
Thank you very much. Thank you all. Insightful conversations. Melanie, we're coming back to you.
Yeah, thank you very much to all of you. Very interesting conversation, and I think we can continue this conversation for the next few hours, I guess. But we also have to, unfortunately, we have to stop at one point. I also would like to remind you that we regularly share updates on related topics on our BBMRI ERIC resources and channels, such as the newsletter. And you can find more information on our website, which is www.bbmrieric.eu. And to our audience, if you would like to share this recording, we will put it online, and also it will be a podcast. And we would be happy if you help us also with share this very important webinar with your colleagues and friends. So thank you for attending, and let's now open the floor for questions and comments. And thanks again, and see you next time.